Welcome to H2K Infosys. H2K Infosys is a e-verify business based in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. We provide 100% job-oriented, instructor-led, face-to-face, true live online software training programs. It also includes access to cloud test lab with software tools. We provide live project for you to work on. We also provide assistance with mock interviews, resume preparation and review, and job placement assistance. H2K Infosys is trusted by so many students across the world. H2K Infosys provides world-class services in IT training with real-time project work for corporates and individuals, special IT training for MS students in the United States, software design, development, QA manual and automation, performance testing and maintenance, IT staff augmentation, job placement assistance, and tech support.
Just a second. The next one is Servlet filters. Let us take a small scenario to explain the purpose of Servlet filters. Let us say you are working on a banking application. Banking application means you have plenty of page calls. That means you want to traverse from your accounts to third-party transfer or customer service or transactions, or if you are doing any kind of transaction like deposit or withdrawal, you need to move between the pages. But for each page, for each and every page, banking application means it should be a secure way of transaction. The first verification is it will be going to use the HTTPS communication, and the next one is it will use the authentication or authorization at each and every page level. So that means whenever we are moving between the pages, in the sense whenever we are moving from one page to another page, for each and every page, your servlet was supposed to verify whether the username was available or not. Username was available or not. Let us say someone has cached some third-party transaction page, and he was directly entering the third-party transaction page for his next visit. Then we are not supposed to allow him to directly enter the third-party transaction page, and we are supposed to redirect the request, the client request to login page first. See, not only this one. Whenever you are using Facebook, you'll get updates from Facebook to your email ID with a link. When you click on that link, they will traverse you to login page instead of direct link access, instead of providing direct link access. The reason for that is they will verify, even though you are traversing to the page, whatever that these guys have sent to you, they'll still need the authentication or authorization kind of stuff to authenticate you to enter into that particular page. Once you have entered those details, you will directly log into that page instead of you logging into your home page. So that means the page level access. Currently what we are supposed to provide, the page level access we need to provide, and at each and every page, at each and every servlet, Whenever you have submitted a page or whenever you have clicked on a link, it will submit onto the server. So the server, nothing but your servlet will receive the request first, and from your servlet, it will be traversed to your JSP page. That's what happened here as well. Even though if you click on login.html and click on submit button from the front end, you'll feel that it was redirected to counter-display.jsp. As a developer, you should understand that the request has hit to the servlet first, and the servlet has asked the request to forward to the JSP page. Even with the Facebook also, the same kind of scenario it follows. So whenever a servlet has received the request, it will verify whether the username or password was available or not. Not exactly the same procedure they will follow. They might use some other procedure, just like the database primary keys, or they'll use some kind of authentication or some kind of session information kind of stuff. So let us say our case, we are verifying whether the username was available or not. If the username was available, then only we'll forward to the correct request, or else we'll forward back to the login page. That's what happened to our Facebook page. But the problem with this approach is, let us say we have 50 servlets. We have 50 servlets, which means you are supposed to write 50 times a validation code. That means for each and every page, anyway, you need the verification kind of stuff. So that means, why can't we write at a central place which will be invoked by your container for each and every resource request? That is nothing but your filter. Filter as a general English meaning, which is used to filter all the information. So in our servlet also, servlet case, we are going to use servlet filter, which will verify each client request or response that means if at all, if the request was having some issues, then you will simply redirect to error page or login page instead of to servlet. Let us draw a small diagram for that. See, this is our client request. Let us assume that this is our client request. Normally, our client request will be submitted to the container first, and then the container will send the request to your servlet. This is your servlet container, and this is your actual servlet or JSP page. So whenever a client request submitted to the servlet container, the container identifies what is the servlet that needs to be invoked. So if you have configured a filter, let us say this is our filter, the request will be first sent to the filter. If at all, if you have multiple filters that are specified, if you have specified to invoke multiple filters, let us say the first one is verifying username and password filter, and the next one is session ID verification filter. Sometimes we might need only session ID filter. You can just remove this one and you can directly interact the session ID filter, and then it will forward the request to your actual servlet. If at all, if the filter decides that, the filter identifies that the request hasn't satisfied the criteria, then from the filter itself, you can return back the result specifying that there is an error or there is an issue and redirect to some other page. So in this case, your servlet won't be involved at all, and from the filter itself, the request or response will be sent back to the client itself. Filters are just like your servlets. Just like servlets. In the sense, filters will be configured within your DD, and also it consists of a life cycle initialization phase, do filter phase, destroy phase. Do filter is where your actual code resides and will be invoked for each and every client request. Your do filter accepts 3 arguments. The first one is request argument, response argument, and the next one is filter chain argument. We'll discuss about filter chain in a minute. And once after that, you need to configure this within your DD. So to configure DD, previously we have learned about servlet and servlet mapping. Here also filter mapping. And the next one is URL pattern. The URL pattern, you can make use of some generic as well, star, which means the filter will be invoked for all the client requests, or else you can specify the particular servlet. So that means for date servlet, whatever the request that will be receiving to date servlet, it will be first invoked by the filter and then only forwarded to the date servlet. You can use asterisk symbol so that you can map multiple requests as well. So that means before writing your servlet, you just need to follow some kind of convention so that you can make use of that within your filter mapping itself. Go and write a filter, right click, new. Here you can see that there is an option called filter. Select that one, or else you need to write a normal filter and then you need to write those 3 methods and configure the filter within your DD. But if you have selected directly filter, then the configuration of filter will be specified by Eclipse within your DD, and it also provides you a dummy definition for all those 3 methods. com.user.filter, name it as user filter, click on finish. So here we have mentioned that it consists of 3 methods. So these methods are available in filter interface. So whenever you are writing a filter, you should implement an interface called filter interface, and you need to provide the definition for 3 methods: init, destroy, and do filter method. The do filter method accepts 3 arguments. First one is request argument, next one is response, the last one is chain argument. But here the request and response are available at the generic level. You need to convert, if you want, you need to convert them to your actual HTTP request and response objects. Currently I want to retrieve some parameters, so I'm converting them by using typecasting. And in the same way, response object as well. Once after that, I'm verifying whether the get, currently I'm writing for get parameter. Later we can change the code and we can verify for session parameters. I'm verifying whether the request.get parameter username is available or not. If username equal to null, that means my username parameter was not available within my request. Then I can say that I want to send some error response. To send error response, previously we have used send redirect. You can make use of send error, which accepts an argument. The argument is nothing but your HTTP status code. To get the HTTP status code, there are several static final variables that are available, which starts with SC underscore. Here you can see that SC underscore bad request, forbidden, found, gateway, and whatever that you want to use. HTTP version not supported, method not allowed, no content, OK means 200 OK, request timeout. These are all HTTP status codes. You can just mention the error code and the browser understands that and will display that particular error onto the control. So currently I'm saying that forbidden. Forbidden means 403, I guess. So whenever I'm saying username not available, I'm responding with some error response, and after that I'm returning the control back to the caller. Before that, just print the username. Write one more statement here. Filter received request. And finally, you have one statement which got filled up by the Eclipse automatically, which is chain.doFilter. Here we have mentioned that we can have any number of filters. So once you have executed doFilter, you want to execute the next filter within your chain of filters. So for that purpose only, you must call chain.doFilter. The chain.doFilter, it will verify, the container verifies within your DD and identifies if there are any other filters available. If at all, if it was available, currently you can see that there is one more filter. This will get invoked, and if it is a lost filter, the container passes the request to the correct servlet, whatever the client has asked. Let us see how we have configured within our web.xml as well. So this is how you have configured within your web.xml, just like how you have specified servlet. Here also filter name, and filter class. So the filter name within your filter and filter mapping, they are supposed to match. And URL pattern, you need to specify. Currently you have specified for your servlet that you want to map for date servlet. So I'm specifying the same for date servlet. Whenever the URL pattern consists of date servlet, it should invoke my filter first, and then only it was supposed to traverse to the date servlet. If you want to write one more filter, write one more filter class, one more filter mapping, and then specify the URL pattern as date servlet. That means which will be invoked by your chain.doFilter for the next as a next filter. So once it has invoked all the filters, it will traverse the request to your servlet itself. Let us go and execute our HTML file one more time. Whenever you made any changes to your web.xml, you should redeploy your application, which means it has restarted the server and deployed the application once again. So username is Steve, password is Steve. You can see that your filter has received the request first and the username printing Steve, and after that it has called the doGet method. Go back to your user filter. So here you can see that filter request received, and after that username was available. That's why it hasn't entered the if loop at all. And finally, it has forwarded the request to your servlet. And after that, your servlet has started executing and doGet method called, and it has printed some context value. And after that, it has forwarded the request to your JSP page. Let us change this to I'm requesting some other user. The user parameter was not available in my request form parameters. Let us redeploy it one more time and execute it your HTML file one more time. Currently, I am expecting a parameter called user from the client, but that parameter was not available. So that means it was supposed to enter the if loop. It was supposed to enter this loop, and this will throw an error. You can see that HTTP status 403. 403 means forbidden error. Access to the specified resource has been forbidden. So from my filter, I'm specifying that currently forget about the business logic. Business logic you can change at any time. But currently our intention is from the filter, you can see that filter received request, username printing null, and once after that it has entered this block, and I'm returning the control back to the client itself, and I'm not calling the chain.do filter, which means it has responded at this level itself, and the request or the control has transferred back to the client itself. And it hasn't executed our servlet code itself. We already know that we are not going to execute the code. That's the reason I have responded back to the client, and I have responded specifying that forbidden error 403 forbidden error. If you want, you can design like you can write the response.send redirect, and you can specify the URL itself as login.html, which will traverse you to the same page, and the client was supposed to enter the details properly. What did the do filter do since we validated the username for null? See, the purpose of do filter is it will receive all the requests. Even though you are writing the code, your container will be going to invoke the do filter based on your URL mapping within your web.xml. It will just filter the request and response, but the business logic code you are supposed to write. It will just provide you a prototype. And in the same way, during the response also, you can specify your filter invocation that will be specified within your web.xml, and you can still specify for what URL currently the filter or filter pattern I have configured by using Eclipse, but you guys are supposed to write on your own, and even the user filter as well, you guys are supposed to write on your own. Don't use Eclipse generated code. Are you guys able to hear my voice?
Yes, Krish, we can hear, but the quality of this conversation is not really good. It's getting worse every day.
Okay. Previously, we have seen about the send redirect issue. Whenever our container has created, whenever our container has received a request, what it will do? It will find out the resource. It will find out the resource, and it will create two objects which are request and response objects, and then it will hand over the request to the servlet. So that means for each and every client request, and one more thing is, if at all, if it is a second request, let us say the client from client request, let us say this is client 1. Client 1, we have sent for the first request that was handed over to our servlet, for first servlet, and the response has sent back. Response has sent back. Let us say the response has received by our client itself. So whatever the request or response objects that got created, they will be eligible for garbage collection. Whenever it has handed over the response back to the client, once after that, the thread will be going to die, and the request and response objects, once a thread has died, that means all your objects will be going to eligible for garbage collection. So during the next request, let us say this is your client request 2, but you are receiving from that same client, your container won't be able to remember whatever the conversation that was happened previously. Your servlet container will create two more objects, request and response, and it will identify whatever the servlet that was supposed to be passed the request, a new servlet, and it will create a new request and response object, and it will simply hand over this request and response objects to your servlet, and it will forward the control to your next servlet. The reason for that is whatever the communication mechanism that we are using between our client and server is HTTP, and the HTTP is a stateless protocol. Stateless protocol, which means it won't maintain any conversation state which happens between them, nothing but client and server. So that means whatever the request and response objects that are handed here, request and response objects that are handed to your servlet, if you are forwarding the same, that's fine. You are using the same request and response object. But if you are using response.send redirect, that means you have returned the control back to the browser, and during the next conversation, it's just like the fresh request from another client. Container will think that this is a request from another client. It won't understand that the same request is coming from the same client. Then it will create a new request and response object. That means whatever the data that you have set, they are not available for your subsequent requests. So those information, whatever that you have specified, they are said to be in a request scope level. They are only useful for one round trip, one request and response purpose. They are not at all useful for subsequent calls. And the next one is application scope. Application scope, nothing but it's available throughout your entire application. Nothing but whenever you have started your application server, and once you have deployed your application, and the parameters that are available with application scope, they are available throughout all your client requests. They are nothing but your context parameters, and they are said to be application scope parameters. But we can't put all the information with application scope because we might receive thousands of client requests and the data will differ between the client requests. So you can't use application scope for each and every client request handling. The next one is session scope. Session scope, which is most important one and which is the required one for any kind of conversational state maintenance. Nothing but you have started a banking application. You want the conversation state to be available for all your transactions or throughout your session. That means your HTTP, whatever the conversation that was holding between your client and server, you need to maintain the conversation state. But currently we have mentioned that your HTTP was stateless protocol and you need to externally maintain the state or maintain the conversational state. That will be specified by using a mechanism called session ID. So whenever you have received a request from client, let us say from client, you have received a request to the server. So that means you are specifying to the server that I want to start a conversation. Then the server will generate an ID, which is nothing but your session ID, and it will hand over the session ID to the client during the first response. So for subsequent calls, the server informs to the browser that please come with the session ID so that I can remember your state. Your state nothing but previously what are all the parameters that are available with the session, or previously what kind of conversation that has happened with the client. Normally we have mentioned that, see, until now we are not at all using any session maintenance kind of stuff. Your HTTP is a stateless protocol. That means you should externally ask your container to provide a session that will be specified by using a method called getSession. Whenever you have asked get the session for the client, then whenever your server has executed this particular method call, then your server understands that, your container understands that it was supposed to generate a session ID, and this session ID should be associated with the response, and the session ID should be passed back to the client. And one more advantage with the session is you can associate any number of attributes to your session, and these parameters or these attributes will be available for subsequent calls. All that you need to do is you just need to ask get a session. Whenever you have asked get a session, your container will do all the ground level work for you, and you It's not required for you to maintain the session as well. That will be taken care by your container itself.
So many of our students have given testimonials on how our training programs are. You will find them on kudzu.com and on our website h2kinfosys.com. On our website h2kinfosys.com, you will also find more detailed information on who we are, the courses that we offer, what each course covers. Also, if you're interested in a demo program, please register on our homepage on the left-hand side. Just give us more information about yourself and we will send you a link for a demo class. The demo class is absolutely free. Experience our commitment by just attending an orientation workshop at no cost. Our team of faculty and advisors are here to guide you with the right information. If you still have more questions, please feel free to call us. Call us at 770-777-1269. This is a United States number. If you're calling from the UK, call us at 020-337-17615. You can also email us at training@h2kinfosys.com or h2kinfosys@gmail.com. Thank you for watching our videos. We wish you a great career in information technology.